If you have a desire to become a better version of your current self, then this podcast is for you. I share with you helpful thoughts, tips, and stories around fitness and self-improvement, which you can apply to your life today. For those of you that want to take control of your life, to learn, to grow, to become that which you desire most, I'm your host, Connor Malone, and this is the pursuit of constant improvement. In today's episode, I'm going to be discussing happiness and purpose, two incredibly important things which essentially make up a huge part of self-improvement, the pursuit of constant improvement, because what is life without happiness, without purpose, which helps guide us on our own pursuit of constant improvement. So I'm really looking forward to this episode because this is something that I've studied in detail throughout the past number of years because I find it so intriguing, happiness as a whole, like how it works, what is it? This happiness thing that everybody speaks about, because what use is it going through life when you aren't happy? I mean, at the end of the day, that's what we're all looking for in some way, shape or form. So what I'm going to be sharing with you today is basically 4 years of my study, but numerous years of other people's study combined into what I feel is the best things which will affect your happiness and how important purpose is in helping guide that. So I hope you enjoy this episode. I think there'll be plenty of things for you to apply in this, but the very first thing I want to go over is a very common misconception with happiness, and that is something called destination addiction. Now, particularly when we are young, we are obsessed with the future in the sense that, I can't wait till I get this, I can't wait till I get that, and we always think, I'll be happy when I get here, or I get this, or I get that. However, with this destination addiction, that very much isn't what happens. That isn't the case. The destination is not where the happiness is, and it's something that a lot of people don't find out until it's too late, that if you keep chasing happiness, it keeps running. So I hope your opinion of happiness now, if it is this case, that it changes, because if you're dependent on happiness coming at a certain point in a certain time and it isn't where you are right now, then you need to change that attitude, you need to change that mindset, because as some people would say, happiness can be a state of mind. But we're going to discuss that in detail and how you can really embrace that. Now, the very first thing I'm going to go over is something that would limit your happiness, and that is the idea of conforming to others' beliefs. Now, the important thing about this world and us as individuals is we are unique. Every single person on this planet is unique. No one person is the same. And you'll hear a million times people tell you to embrace that, because why wouldn't you? You've been put on this planet as this unique individual, yet you're trying to conform to what other people want. And I get it, because growing up, that's what naturally we do, because we chase status, and status comes from conforming to others and things like that. But it's a slippery slope, conforming to others' ideas. You can never be happy when you're following what other people believe. So make sure that whatever you're doing in your own pursuit of constant improvement, that it isn't based on conforming to others, that it's based on your own beliefs. Because there'll be loads of things that I'll say here today, right? It doesn't mean that, let's say for whatever reason you respect my opinion and you think, well, what Connor said was true. It doesn't mean you need to follow everything I say. It's again, this idea of conforming to others. People tend to stick to one person's ideas. Take ideas from different people, make your own ideas. Again, don't conform to everybody else's. Make sure that you have your own opinions in life, because if you stick to others, you won't be confident in them, and you won't be fulfilled in them, and you certainly won't be happy with them. So make sure that's something that you start doing today, that you embrace your uniqueness and you have your own opinions. The next part I'm going to talk about is one of my favorite quotes. It's a very, very common quote by Theodore Roosevelt, and it is that comparison is the thief of joy. Now, simply what that means is when we start to compare ourselves to others, you can't possibly be happy. There's no chance. Because you're comparing, in most cases, your chapter 1 to somebody's chapter 60. So when comparison comes into it, there's this never-ending losing battle, because there's always going to be somebody doing better than you. But I guarantee you this, there is always going to be somebody that's worse off than you. So one thing I heard a while ago, it was always look down. Now, that sounds a bit strange, but in the sense it meant that always look at what is below you, in terms of there are people that don't have homes. Never mind the abundance of other things we have. Think of people that are starving. Think of the abundance that you have. That is the root of happiness to me, is understand the abundance that you have, being grateful, which is something we'll go on to talk about. But that starts to fade when we start to compare, because as Theodore Roosevelt once said, comparison is the thief of joy. So make sure when you're feeling a little bit down, you're not comparing yourself to others, because nothing good comes from it. Now, as I just spoke about there, gratitude, something that has changed my life in many ways. An amazing thing which people see as a bit, let's say when you start getting into self-improvement, people see it as a bit like a tree hugger kind of thing, right? Like, oh, gratitude for this and that. It's a very, very simple thing. In fact, if you're not practicing gratitude, then I feel sorry for you, because why wouldn't you be grateful for the abundance of things we have in this world? The things that you have as an individual, which will be different from me. And there's a quote that I want to talk about from a guy called Naval Ravikant, who, if you haven't heard of him before, I highly recommend you search him up. His name, just Naval, N-E-V-A-L. You'll find some of his content. It's amazing. But anyway, the quote goes like this. Happiness is there when you remove the thought that something is missing in your life. So essentially, people are always, and this relates back to our first point, they're always thinking that there's something missing. There's, oh, when I get this, I'll be happy. When I get that, oh, this isn't quite right. But when it is right, then I'll be happy. Again, this isn't the case. This is your attitude. It's coming down to your attitude. One object cannot change your happiness for a long period of time. It may change it in the short term, which again is going to be the next thing we talk about. But yeah, it's just making sure that happiness is exactly where you are right now. It's just you need to remove the thought that you are missing something when it comes to that. Another thing, actually, talking on that, which Naval talks about a lot, there is good in everything. It's just that most people choose to ignore it. So let's say something bad happens to you. For example, one thing that everybody will experience in life is unfortunately death of a loved one. Now, death is a horrible thing for most people. Of course it is. It's terrible. It causes you to grieve. It's not a nice feeling. However, that does not mean there will be some good in it. Now, that sounds to a lot of people like, well, how could you possibly mean that? How is there good in death? Now, I'm not saying that the good outweighs the bad, okay? But there can be good in everything. For example, that someone isn't suffering. You could be grateful for the time that you actually spent with them, the fact that you actually met them. There's so many beneficial ways to it, so many things to be grateful for. But if you let all the negativity overshadow your thoughts, then that's how you're going to feel. Whereas if you harness anything good, even if it's a tiny bit of good, if you harness the good, which is surrounded by all the bad, you're going to feel way happier in the long run. Now, again, I hope you didn't get confused by that and me saying that death's a bad thing, but leading on from that, there's a quote by Steve Jobs that says that death is likely the single greatest invention in life. And the reason that is because it creates a sense of urgency. Imagine we didn't have death in this world, right? Imagine we all lived forever. Sounds great, but it wouldn't be, because there's no urgency. We would never do anything. Whereas death it brings in the new. It brings in, like, you imagine there was only ever birth or whatever, we would be massively overpopulated. But I'll digress if I go into that. But in the sense of that it gives you urgency. That's such an important part of happiness, is urgency. Because if you relax too much and you don't have any urgency in life, you'll end up just floating through life. You'll never get anything done, and you'll live with regret. There's a really good quote again by Tim Grover, which says, if you think the price of winning is high, wait until you get the bill from regret. And it's an incredible quote, because it's so true that if we do not have any urgency in life, we will end up with a lot of regret, and regret weighs way heavier than the price of winning. It's one of the things that is centered around my pursuit of constant improvement, is the fear of not living or not dying with regrets, with huge regrets. I can't imagine anything worse than that, to be honest. But we'll turn it a little bit more positive here, and we'll talk about our environment, because every day we have around, there's a stat that says from around 12,000 to 60,000 thoughts per day. And our environment dictates a lot of our thoughts. So if you're in a negative environment, guess what? You're going to have a lot of negative thoughts. Whereas if you're in a positive environment, you are far more likely to have positive thoughts. Positive thoughts result in positive actions. So maybe it's your workplace, maybe it's your friend group, maybe it's your family, whatever that may be, it may be a negative environment. It is your job and your job alone to remove yourself from that environment. If it is the case that there's an environment that's just draining you, you need to get yourself out of that, because no matter how strong you are, it will weigh you down. It will weigh on your subconscious mind, because negativity, it really, if it's surrounding you, it will absorb you, whether you like it or not. So make sure that your environment is a positive one. Surround yourself with positive people, which is a million people will say that, but it's so incredibly true. Let's say you're down, you're upset. You surround yourself with negative people, that's only ever going to get worse. If you surround yourself with positive people, it will get better. You will learn, you will grow, you will adapt, rather than staying in the same stagnant place if you surround yourself in negative environments with negative people. And a lot of that can come not just from people, because people associate environments with people, right? They say like, right, oh, what environment are you in? And they automatically think, what people am I around? But one thing that I take, for example, is your room. How much time do you spend in your room? What is in your room? What is it? Is it just like, let's say, for example, you walk into your room. What is it? Is it dark? Is there, I don't know, just bottles of alcohol everywhere? Is there something? That's a weird topic, but whatever. In the sense of my room, for example, what I done a few years ago is I made sure when I went in my room, there was things that I was either proud of or things that inspired me. In the sense of, that's why people have wallpapers. It's like, I have 3 very specific pictures on my wall. I have a board which has quotes on it because I want to memorize them. It has basically something to focus on it. I have my books. I have like cards that I've had from people, things that mean a lot to me. It's on my walls, and that's part of my environment. Whereas if I was coming home to a dark, I'll not say messy because my room is messy, and my mum will be listening here, so we'll avoid that. But in terms of you come to a room that is just so dark and depressing, that isn't your environment. How do you expect to feel? So make sure wherever you're going that there's some form of positivity in it, because that will affect, again, your subconscious. Now, the next thing I'm going to go into is about instant gratification. Now, what that means in simple terms is if something offers instant gratification, it is a very quick reward, really. You feel good straight away. So you could think of drinking alcohol, you could think of taking drugs, you could think of eating binge food because it feels really good at the time. Whereas let's say you eat a healthy meal, it may not taste great, but it will benefit you in the long run. Now, a very important thing for happiness is to delay short-term gratification or instant gratification for long-term satisfaction, in the sense that that comes from your decision making. So if you're somebody that always picks what tastes best, the unhealthiest foods, well, guess what? In a few months' time, you're going to have a lot more body fat. You're going to feel a lot more rubbish than you would if you had just been a little bit more disciplined and delayed instant gratification and ate more healthy foods. So that's one example of it. We could take it to alcohol or drugs. Let's say it's the weekend, you're not feeling great. You want instant gratification. Instant gratification tends to have repercussions, in the sense that you go and drink alcohol, you feel amazing at the time, but the next morning you wake up, you're hungover, it ruins your next day and everything like that. We need to make sure that we are delaying this instant gratification as much as possible. And I'm not saying that you don't ever eat bad foods or you don't ever go out drinking, because I do both, but I make sure that I'm controlling it. And I make sure that I'm not chasing it out of necessity. So if I go out drinking or if I go out for food that may not be the healthiest, I make sure that I'm doing it out of choice and it's not out of me seeking instant gratification, because that will not lead to happiness. Another one which I love, which will greatly affect your happiness, and you will have experienced this for sure, is finding flow states. Now, a flow state is where time just passes by. You feel like time is it goes by in a click of a finger. You enjoy it in the moment, you feel good, you feel inspired, you feel energized. That is a flow state. You are completely focused and absorbed in the task at hand. Now, for young guys, that may have been playing sports, that may have been playing football, that may be if you're a competitive athlete, that may be when you're competing. If you're a girl, that may be when you were dancing when you were younger. Whatever this may be, those are those flow states. But we tend to fall away from them when we become adults, because we don't play sports, because it's seen as childish, or we've not got the time, or what, for whatever reason. But find something that can put you in those flow states. For a guy, it might be playing five-a-sides on a Tuesday night. Maybe that hour and a half that you play for just passes by. That's a great thing to have in your life for happiness, in the sense that maybe you're having a difficult week. You've got football to look forward to. You've got that flow state to look forward to. So any activity that induces a flow state, make sure that you're using that in your week, that it's taking up some of your time. It may be reading books. For some people, time just passes by and they feel great. You can't focus on anything else. That is a flow state and a flow activity. So make sure that they make up some of your week. Now, the next thing is a really interesting one. This is something called the hedonic treadmill or hedonic adaptation. Now, essentially what this is I'll give you a story, in fact, which will probably better explain it. Now, there was a guy once and he was in a helicopter. He had his own helicopter and he was flying in his helicopter. And he looked up at the sky and he seen an airplane. He's like, wow, I wish I had a private jet. And then there was a guy down below in a Rolls Royce. And he looked up and he seen this guy in his helicopter and he thought, wow, I wish I had one of those. And there was a guy next to him in a nice car and he thought, wow, look at that Rolls Royce. I wish I had a Rolls Royce. And then there was a guy in a normal car and he was like, wow, I wish I had that nice car. And then it moved down again and there was a guy in a bike. And the only thing he could think of is, wow, I wish I had a car. I'd get places so much faster. It'd be so much better. And then there was a guy walking on the side and he thought the same thing. But I wish I had a bike. I'd be so much fitter. I would get places so much faster. And then it zooms out and there's somebody at their window in a wheelchair and all he can think is, I wish I could walk. Now, the reason I just explained that story is because throughout that story, we've seen something called hedonic adaptation. Now, what happens is once we get something that we want, so for example, let's say you've just passed your driving test. All you want is that new car or that car, just any car. It gets you from point A to point B. You get that car, you drive it for 6 months, and guess what? You want a new car. You want more. That is hedonic adaptation. And the reason I'm telling you this is it's very important to understand that hedonic adaptation will impact your life. Whenever you do something well and you feel so happy about it, that happiness will fade and you'll always want more. So how can we control that? Now, it takes us back to one of our points earlier, which is practicing gratitude. So let's say you're in your Rolls Royce, right? Lucky you. And you're driving down the street. Rather than looking up and saying, wow, wish I had a helicopter. Why don't you look and you say, wow, look at my car. I'm so grateful. I'm so lucky. And when you walk out your car, I'm so grateful that I can walk. I'm so grateful that it's a nice day. You're grateful for every single thing you have. So you don't fall down that path of always wanting more, because it's a dangerous path, because you can always have more. It never ends. So make sure whatever you have, whatever your goals are, you're making sure that you are grateful for what you have already. And the way I do that is by practicing gratitude every day with a gratitude journal. So my gratitude journal, I just hit just over 700 days on my gratitude journal. Now before I used that, I used another just diary, and I used to write in a diary. I used that for about a year. But 700 days, not in a row, but throughout the past few years. And I was like, wow, that's pretty incredible. But the mindset change I've had from day one to now has been incredible, because I'm so much more grateful. Because all I do every day is I open up this app. I use the Calm app. If you've ever used Calm, it's a brilliant app. Good for meditation, for sleep, but it also has a gratitude journal section. And all it asks you to do is name 3 things you're grateful for. Now, that doesn't need to be the car you have, the objects you have. Think a little bit deeper than that. Spend some time on this. Maybe it's spending time with a friend that you've not seen in a while. Maybe it's, like for me, it could be this table in front of me. I'm grateful for having this. How does it impact my life? How does my health, that's something I'm grateful for all the time. If you wake up in the morning and you're not in pain, that's an incredible thing to be grateful for. Because guess what? It can be taken away at any time, whenever, and you have no control on that. So yeah, make sure what you're doing is you're practicing gratitude on a regular basis, because it will change your outlook on things. You won't be that guy sitting in that nice car looking up and wanting more. You'll be that guy in that nice car, but being grateful for what you have. So that's probably one of the things that's had the biggest impact on my happiness, has been practicing gratitude. However, the thing that has had the second most, or probably maybe even tips it the most, in terms of the impact on my happiness, is this thing that I'm about to tell you. Now, this is something that I heard on a podcast from Stephen Bartlett, so the Diary of a CEO podcast, a guy called Mo Gaudat. And he said that happiness equals reality minus expectations. Now, to me, when I listened to this, it hit me hard. I was like, wow, when he explained that, I was like, holy shit, that's so applicable to my life, and I'm sure it will be to yours as well. So basically what it means is, Our happiness equals our reality once we take away our expectation. So let's say you listen to this podcast today and you've came on and you think, oh, this is going to be the most amazing podcast, whatever, I'm going to learn so much. Let's say I disappointed you for whatever reason and you didn't learn much. Your expectation was higher than the reality. So what we're left with is a deficit. And you tend to be a little bit, not too happy, whatever. But let's say the opposite happens and I exceed your expectations. The reality is more than your expectations. You get a wee bit cheerful. You're like, oh, wow, that was brilliant. I really enjoyed that and whatever. Any experience that you go to, it's very common for us if something we're being putting off, we don't want to do, it's quite easy for it to exceed our expectations because we don't expect much of it and we get a little bit cheerful, we get happy. So when things exceed your expectations, or the expectation, exceeds reality, that's when we become happy. Now, one way we can change that comes back to gratitude. If you expect less, the reality will be greater and you'll become happier. If you go about life and you expect everything to come to you, you expect, oh, I should get this, I should get that, oh, it's raining today, this, blah, blah, blah. You complain about everything because you're expecting the greatest in everything. You're never going to be happy. It's a never-ending cycle of unhappiness if you expect the best from everything, and that includes in everyone. If you expect when you're talking to people for everybody to treat you with respect, guess what? A lot of people aren't. Tough. You don't control that. But if you expect to control that, you ain't going to be happy. So again, make sure that your expectations are somewhat lowered in other people, and yourself keep them high, keep your standards high, but in others, lower your expectations and be grateful for everything that you have. Now, I want to finish by talking about purpose a little bit, because there's a quote that really describes it well from Viktor Frankl, and he says, "A man without purpose distracts himself with pleasure." Now, when I talk about purpose, I talk about my pursuit of constant improvement. My weeks have clear structure. Everything I do is for a specific reason. I have a clear thing that I'm pursuing. I want to become better every single day. If you don't have that, you don't have any purpose in your life, you will distract yourself with pleasures. So in the sense of going out and doing things, seeking this instant gratification, these instant gratification hits, that's what you'll do. So if you want to change that and you want to have a purpose, it is relatively simple. Now, people think, oh, I need to realize my purpose or whatever. Your purpose is created. You can create your own purpose. You do not need to wait for somebody or something to tell you what that is. Did somebody come from above and tell me about the pursuit of constant improvement? No, I essentially made it up. In the sense that I thought, wow, look at the benefits I've been getting recently, with the objective of clearly and constantly improving myself. And that gave me purpose in my life. And I live so much happier because of it. Because my life isn't filled with short-term pleasures, it's filled with purpose. So don't dawn on the fact that, oh, I don't have a purpose or whatever. You can create it. And it may change. It doesn't need to be a lifelong purpose or a lifelong pursuit. It will change throughout your lifetime. So don't worry about that. Because pleasurable tasks often run out, whereas purposeful tasks don't. They are ongoing. Now, a couple of actionable tips that you can take with you. We'll relate it back to that purpose in terms of, one way you can think about it is, what is your reason for acting every day? What are you doing every day and what's your reason for it? Like if you're going to the gym, just think a little bit, why are you going to the gym? Because you want to feel healthier, you want to become better, you want to be proud of yourself, you want to be confident, then great. That's your purpose. That's giving you purpose in your life. If you're thinking, oh, why am I going out? Oh, I'm going out to spend time with people I love and I'm going to do this. Or is it just to distract yourself? Think of the task before you do them. Think of your actions. Why are you doing things? Because our actions consistently will dictate where we end up in life. So by making sure that our actions have clear purpose, you'll get into a lot better positions from that. The other thing I've mentioned a million times is practicing gratitude today. But it's something that you can apply this very second. You could have applied it throughout this episode. If you need somewhere to practice gratitude, again, I use the Calm app. It has a journal on it. There'll be a million different apps that you could use to practice gratitude. You could write it down. Writing is very beneficial, of course, so writing it down may be better for you, but whatever you can stick to consistently. Don't use the Calm app if the reminders don't work for you for whatever reason. Pick whatever you can stick to consistently. The other thing I want you to do is, if you want to become happier, make sure that in your week you have some form of flow-inducing activity. Now, what I mean by that is that game of football that makes you feel like time just passes by, go and play that. Text a friend, say, do you want to meet up, play football? Or maybe there's 5-a-sides that you can join. Go and play it. Go and do it. Whatever that is, make sure you're doing that, because it's going to make you feel a lot better. Now, I've said a million different quotes over this podcast, but I want to leave you with one more. This is a quote that I learned from when I went to see Stephen Bartlett live, the Diary of a CEO live tour. It was incredible. Something I've never experienced anything like it. But I bought a hoodie from that. The reason I bought a hoodie was just, well, to remember it. It was like memorabilia, I suppose. But there's a quote on the back of it. And that quote says, if you go through life believing that happiness is somewhere else, it will never be where you are now. And we spoke about this at the start in the sense of the destination addiction. If you're constantly thinking, I'll be happy when this happens, or I'll be happy when I get this, it ain't coming. So change your attitude, change your perspectives, start practicing gratitude, all these things we spoke about today, and your happiness will change. You will become more purpose-driven. You'll live a happier life. I promise you that. Now, as always, I'm incredibly grateful for you listening to this podcast. Please, anything I've spoke about, if you can, take it, apply it to your life, and pursue constant improvement. Thank you for listening.